The last topic in Chapter 6 is the degree of operating leverage at a particular level of sales and the related cost structure. This information will help the managers to decide how the sales volume will impact the net operating in the future, so we can make accurate predictions. Operating leverage in terms of formula is the division of the total contribution margin divided by the net operating income at a certain level of sales. After we understand the structure of the contribution margin income statement, we know contribution margin is sales revenue deduct all of the variable cost and expenses. The net operating income is contribution margin further deduct the total fixed cost and expenses. So the division of contribution margin and the net operating income actually reflect the structure of the fixed cost and variable cost, the relative portion of these two types of cost in the company's operation. So the operating leverage is fundamentally determined by the relative portion of fixed cost and variable cost in the operation. For higher fixed cost industries, such as the utilities, airline companies, they normally have higher contribution margin because the lower variable expenses. Then by the formula, the calculation will give higher operating leverage for high fixed cost companies. On the other side, if the company has relative high variable cost, such as the retail stores or accounting firms, the service industries, they have relative low capital expenditures or the fixed cost and expenses. They will have lower contribution margin because they need to cover higher variable expenses. Then their operating leverage will be relatively lower than the other type of companies. But this structure there is really no absolute good or bad. So both type of operating leverage has advantage and disadvantage. We will talk about it more after we go over the example. For the bike company as our center example in this chapter, the 500 is our base or the actual sales revenue for the month. So based upon this level of sales volume, the company's current operating leverage equals to the total contribution margin, which is 100,000 divided by the 20,000 net operating income. So we got a integer 5 operating leverage degree. So how we can use this 5 in the CVP analysis and the prediction for the future? The 5 basically means later, so based upon, so if you have 500 sales volume, if we can increase the sales, for example, next year to like 500 plus 10%. So if you can increase your bike sales volume by 10% from 500, then the income increase will be 5 times of the 10% will be the net income increase. So the 5 is like a sensitivity leverage. So it indicates how the net income change will be sensitive to the sales volume change. So if you have 1 change as the sales revenue, the income will change 5 times of the sales revenue. So that's an easy way for managers to make a prediction for the net operating income if you want to change the sales volume without calculating the whole income statement. So now let's verify this prediction. As we just explained, so this operational leverage, the usefulness is if, for example, we can increase the sales revenue for the future by 10%, then the net operating income will increase by 50% for sure, without you computing the net income for the 10% more sales revenue. So let's verify this prediction using the two income statement. The left column is the current, the base sales situation. Now the increased sales, so it's not easy like you are doing another income statement with 10% increase the sales volume. So the sales revenue and the variable expense will be both increased by 10%. So the contribution margin will increase by 10% because the increase is 10,000 divided by the original contribution margin is 10%. But after deducting the constant fixed expense, the net income will be increased by 10,000. So this 10,000 divided by the original income, so you can see is 50%. So contribution margin only increased 10%, but the operating income can increase 50%. 10,000 divided by 20,000. So proof what we talk about when we make the simple prediction without constructing the income statement. So we can quickly know the increase of the profit will be 50% of the 20,000 will be 10,000. But be careful when you go to a different volume of production. For example, when you go to 600 or 700 or 650, the operating leverage decrease by the other levels of sales volume will not be 5 anymore. It will increase or decrease depending on the new contribution margin and the net operating income. So when you refer to the operating leverage decrease, you must specify which sales level we are talking about. Cost structure is directly related to the operating leverage calculation. As we mentioned, even the formula show the contribution margin and net income, but the fundamental the reason caused the operating leverage change is the relative portion of the company's variable cost and fixed cost. So the cost structure refers to this relative portion of the fixed and variable cost in an organization. So the cost structure, be careful, is not talking about the structure for your product cost, period cost, direct cost, indirect cost, especially referring to the relative weight of the fixed and the variable expenses. For most of the operational structure, the managers has the final decision, or they can influence this relative portion, because they can decide when you have some project idea, you may decide how, when you do the investment, I want to invest more on the fixed expenditure or the variable expenditure. For example, if you want to increase your production volume, so I need to expand my production volume. Right now, I only have one factory building, right? So for the current production. When you want to add another factory building, you have two options. For example, you can build the you can hire a construction company and build the new building for yourself. So basically, more investment on this fixed building, and then fixed depreciation will be added later. But also, if you don't want to make a big investment for building your own construction site, I can rent a building site, right? I can rent a building for 5 years. So in that case, you will avoid a big capital expenditure and you will pay like rental expenses or the leasing expenses for the new factory building. And the rental expenses will be more likely a smaller percentage than the depreciation we take from a new construction, right? So the manager's decision can influence or decide the relative portion. So how you choose the structure. I want to have more higher fixed cost or have a higher variable cost is depending on the industry. So it's not completely by the manager's own choices. It's also depending on which industry you are operating, because we need to follow the industry norms. And then the managers can put some of their own opinion, onto the choices. And here is a summary for the typical high fixed cost industries or high variable cost industries. For the high fixed cost industries, such as the oil, gas, other utility companies, airline companies, they have big capital expenditure. So their oil and gas reserve, they need to have all of the acquisition for the land, oil, and the gas field. For airline companies, they need to have their very expensive fleet, right? All of the airplanes to operate your services. So they have relative high fixed cost, and based upon the formula of operating leverage, they will have relative high operating leverage. So high fixed cost resulting higher operating leverage. So the advantage for this type of company will, when they have a smaller increase on their sales revenue, they can have a higher increase on the operating income. So a small force on the sales volume change can cause a big change on the income. So if the revenue is on the going up, so if the revenue is going strong, then the company will be doing very well. But if your sales volume decrease, the net income will also decrease much faster than the sales revenue decrease. Like, for example, during the COVID-19, many of the companies, their sales volume, right, so customer revenue quickly down, but then you can see how their net operating income will react to the sales volume or sales revenue decrease. The high operating leverage will be less advantage in this case. On the other side, for other type of industries such as restaurants or like retail stores, accounting firms, they have higher variable cost, like the inventory cost, supply cost, labor cost, but a relatively low fixed cost. They most of the time rent their operation, like the small building, right, for their operation, or rent their office spaces. So they don't have lots of or high fixed cost. For low fixed cost companies, they have low operating leverage, and they can have much higher or greater profit stability, because when their income increase or decrease, the net income will be less sensitive to the revenue increase or decrease compared to the high fixed cost companies. So I'm not really saying absolute, stable, but overall, if you operate in this type of companies, your income is less sensitive to the revenue fluctuations. So the final decision of the cost structure for like your own company is depending on the industry you operate, the general economy, and also the manager's choices. So, but the cost structure on an operating leverage is very critical and very important. because sometimes once you define your cost structure, you couldn't really change or alter it in a relative short period. Okay, for example, after I put the money in a new office building or factory building, you cannot really get rid of it quickly, right? So that's some decision will affect your operation for a long period of time. Then the rest of we have some practice questions later. You can check the slide. We have the question, then we have the answers. Okay, you can check the related practice on operating leverage itself and how can we use it to predict the future income change. And the rest of the chapter, I'm not covering especially this break-even sales or target profit sales for more than one type of product. We call sales mix. And the sales mix, we basically use the same idea from the one or single product formulas, but we mix all of the different products or departments together using the weighted average contribution margin ratio. So when you calculate the break-even or target profits for sales mix, because we cannot really do the weighted average for the unit, we have to start from the contribution margin. So we get the weighted average contribution margin for different products, and then calculate a total break-even sales or target profit sales, then allocate. So based upon your sales mix percentage, then allocate the total break-even back to the different products. So do this part as optional, okay, but I think as long as you really can master the single product break even, the sales mix will be much similar.